Another thing I struggled with in Goodreads was books that I did not finish, or books that I read to my children, but I don't want to count toward my book challenge or have taking over my read list because then it affects my recommendations. But I still wanted to know what I read because at the end of the day, I did read a whole lot of books that I'm not counting. If you want to count children's books, absolutely fine. If you don't want to count children's books, absolutely fine. I read at least 3 a day, and so it just blows my reading way out of proportion, and I don't want it to say that I read 1,000 books a year. I want it to be what I read for me. For did not finish, here, let's go over to my books to make this make more sense. For books that I did not finish, I don't want them to count toward my reading total. I don't want to call them read because they're not really. I don't want them to show up on my currently reading because I kind of want them to disappear. I don't want them to show up on my want to read because I don't want to pick them up in 6 months and have forgotten and started them again. So what I want to do is actually create somewhere else for them to go. Somewhere else for the children's books to go, whatever you have. So what you have to remember is these are bookshelves, and I think of them as like a full unit, like a bookshelf you buy, it's freestanding, it sits in your living room kind of thing. A book can only be on one bookshelf. So it can be a read, it can be you're currently reading, or it can be a want to read, but it can't be all at the same time. These are exclusive. Your book has to sit on one of these, and it can only sit on one of these. And Goodreads comes with the 3 standard shelves. Then you can make shelves, and books can sit on as many of them as you want. So if you have a book that involves a baby and a billionaire and a motorcycle club, well, congratulations. You can find it and sort via these titles because you can click on any that you want. So like this book, The Wallflower Wager, was about a woman who, it's historical setting, and she's a virgin. It's not that uncommon in historical romance. So those are things I can sort by. But it's read. It's not read and currently reading. So what you need to do is come up in here to edit and add a shelf to the exclusive. So I added did not finish, and it's exclusive. I can also add children's. That showed up down here, and I'm going to make it exclusive. The reason being, I want to track the books I read for my child, but I do not want to count them toward my reading challenge or toward my books read, and I don't want them to impact my recommendations. All right, I'm done. So now if I read, say, I think my internet's being really slow, but there we go. I read a lot of Mo Williams. Instead of coming in and saying I want to read or I'm currently reading, I'm just going to click it as children's. That's it. I'm not putting a date in. When I go back to my home, I've only read 12 books. It hasn't changed. When I go to my books, sorry, my internet is slow. It's not going to show up on read or currently reading or want to read. It's only going to show up on children's. So I can do that as many times as I want. And as long as I'm not putting a date in, it won't affect my challenge. And as long as I'm not adding it to my currently reading, want to read, it won't affect my recommendations. Now, if I do put a date in, it will affect my challenge. So let's find another book to add. If I add this to read, and then I rate it, sometimes the little bubble pops up so you can review it there, but I'll do it on the other page. If I go into children's and I set a date read, I say, yes, I read this today, save. Now it will affect my reading challenge because now it says 13. And before it said 12. This screen just sometimes takes a minute to update. So you can absolutely track the books you're reading to your children. You can absolutely track your did not finishes and do it in such a way that either does or doesn't affect your book total and does or doesn't impact your recommendations. The other time that this sometimes is useful, and this is a personal preference, I count any books as read, whether I read them with my eyeballs or read them via ears like an audiobook. To me, those are both read. Some people do not count them both as read. So you could do two things. You could, one, make a shelf down here for audiobooks so that you know when you've read it, hey, this year I listened to 37 audiobooks. That's totally, and it would count toward your total. It would count toward all your things, but it would keep it separate just so that you can sort by those. Or if you did not want it to count toward your total because you like to do a challenge that's only with reading with your eyes, you could again do the same thing. You could set the books that you've read on a separate shelf, call them audio, and not put a date in. So in case you're like, but I really like knowing when I read them, the easy answer there is we have a date added and a date read. Add your audiobooks when you read them, but don't mark them as read. So you might have an audiobook you read January 9th and another one you did January 20th, but as long as you're only using date added, it doesn't affect your quantity of books as read. Anywho, using your bookshelves versus your shelves can help you sort and organize your books, but it also can give you options for tracking multiple things without affecting your recommendations or your total books read.